dad or a parental figure?
So this is from my dad, Armand, who was here last service, and then today he's back in Florida, but he really wanted to be a part of it. So thanks for letting him be here vicariously. So he says, I was 26 years old, working and married 3 years when I first became a father to our son, Mark. It was a transformational experience in which my whole life changed. It was a lot for us to juggle, but we happily managed. Then 7 years later, we were blessed with our second child, our beautiful daughter, Allison Grace. My first encounter with Grace as a father was right after birth in her world debut, her opening act, as she flexed her lung power with vigor on entering the planet. To soothe her, I did what I always did when she was in the womb. I sang Stars and Stripes Forever. It immediately startled her to attention, and the look I got from her was as if to say, how did you know that would do the trick? Her passion for music has only grown over the years and has brought her full circle to this very day. I'll say that as a father, your life changes. You have a renewed sense of purpose that drives you to work harder and smarter and to provide for your family. Your humanity is ignited as you try to listen more, be gentle, kind, and more playful. There's a deeper sense of pride, and you have new little mini-me's running around you and welcoming you home. Having attained my perfect family, a little boy and a girl, was amazing. It made me very proud and grateful as a dad. And I will now pass to you.
Right, Roberto.
You want this in Spanish or English?
Surprise us.
A little of both, I don't know.
Okay. Talking about my experience to be a dad, I think it's just a good reflection of my father. I have a wonderful father and a wonderful cousins, uncles, and family. They are oriented to be just not to be a father, just to be a figure to everyone that we show up. Like we show good skills and good heart to everyone around us. And talking about my kids, the most wonderful thing that I have be a dad is like seeing growing up. And the most sad thing that I have be a dad is watching them growing up.
Yes, that's wonderful, thank you. Come on.
Okay, I'm not much of a griller. So my experience of fatherhood started out with disappointment, actually, because Kathy and I both were the oldest of relatively large families, Kathy of 8 and I of 4, and we thought, oh, this is just going to be a natural thing that happens. That, we're going to get married, and before too long, we're going to start having children, and I'll be a dad. But that didn't happen. And but I realized as life has gone on that I've had lots of opportunities to be a dad, to be a father. And in the beginning, Kathy was doing childcare, and we had children come into our house, and so I was a fatherly figure to them while they were there. Whether it was just there over lunch, or some of them actually lived with us for a period of time. We had Christopher and Caroline, lived with us for a little while. They actually came to church here. There was Helen and Eddie. Eddie Ordway, I'm thinking of. Ed Freed is my friend now, and is Helen's brother. But all of these young people have allowed me to be a fatherly figure. And then I was scoutmaster for a while, involved with the youth group a little bit. So that's my experience of fatherhood. And then after many years, God blessed Kathy and I with the opportunity to adopt a child. That's been a real joy. We were prepared to adopt an older child because we were working through the state agency, and that's what was available. And lo and behold, when the day came, God provided us with a 3-month-old baby. And we watched her and guided her in her growth for 33 years now. It's happy.
Yes.
For me, I grew up without a father figure in the home. And I have no children of my own. I have 3 stepchildren from 2 different marriages. One, John, who's 35, Dylan, who's 24, and of course Athena, who's 18. And I met them, they were mostly done when I met them. You know? When I met John, he was, it was a couple days before his 15th birthday. And I knew that I couldn't walk in and be an authoritarian. I had to, work with him. He was his own human. Then later down the road, when I met Dylan and Athena, again, they were mostly grown. Dylan was 18, Athena was 11, and I had to meet them on even ground, in a way, keep an even keel, not be too crazy, not try to be an authoritarian, and just try to maybe impart some knowledge and have a little fun and be stable. I think in my mind, stability was the biggest focus. But it's been a great experience, and I can't wait for what's next.
So fatherhood, first of all, I grew up in a very Scottish environment. My mother was 16 when she immigrated to this country with 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and her parents. Under the Scottish clan system, the mother's brothers had an obligation about raising her son. And I was the only son. I had 3 older sisters and myself. So I had Uncle Dave, Uncle Hugh, Uncle Jim, as well as my dad. While I grew up between the 6th grade and high school, my parents separated 3 times. Yeah, it was anywhere from 8 to 10 months at a time. And my uncles would get involved with that. And then my father and I would see each other on weekends and things of that sort. The uncles were very involved. Uncle Jim, who was retired from Delta, but he had worked for Northeast Yellowbird Airlines. He made sure I got on an airplane and got a ride when I was 6 years old. And that was Uncle Jim, and Uncle Dave had an oil delivery business, and when I was out of school, summers or vacations, when he had to go out to Western Mass to deliver fuel to farms, he would stop and pick me up. I would go with him for the day. We'd stop and eat in diners. It was just a great experience. Uncle Hugh made sure that I got to the YMCA and that I joined the Y and that I was going to the Y, and actually I ended up swimming on the Sea Lions, was the Sea Lions team as well. So that fatherhood to me was really my dad. We had a good relationship, and we had the uncles that were very much involved in my life, and I had the privilege later in life of actually helping them out with some problems and things they had as they aged in place. So it's been very good, I suppose. One of the things in fatherhood, of course, I have Greg and I have Susan, I have 2 biological children. I also have Tony. Tony was a fresh air child, and he came to visit us first. I remember when he came that first day, he was 7 years old, and he's not a very big guy. And we walked across the street. At that time, we had lambs and sheep and on the farm, and I walked across to show him the sheep. And he held my hand, and he looked up at me, this little kid, and he said, "Can I call you Dad?" He said, "I don't have anybody to call Dad." And it's one of the moments you always remember, because yes, absolutely. Tony is the same age as Greg. They're both going to be 59 in the fall. Tony now talks to me about his 401k and his retirement plans. And he was a fresh air child with us for that year, and then the next year he came, we kept him for a longer period of time. And then when he was in the 7th grade, his actually his grandmother contacted me because his grandmother was raising him in Brownsville, New York, which I've never been to. I've been told I would not be welcome there. But she called me and said, Tony's he's kind of getting into trouble. He's not going to school. He's doing this stuff. And I looked at it and said, okay. I said, well, listen, at that time I was arbitrating a dispute for the Defense Logistic Agency in New York City. Just worked out that way. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to be down there. I'm going to be in the village at the Defense Logistic Agency. Why don't I'm going to stay there. Why don't we meet for dinner? And we met for dinner. And she wanted me to adopt Tony. And I didn't think that was a good idea based on my sisters who had adopted kids. And there were problems, especially because Tony knew his cousins. He knew his mother. She may not have been in his life that much. So what I agreed to do was take over his guardianship, which amounted to the same thing. And Tony came up here in Warner. Greg shared his room, put in bunk beds, so they shared the room through the 7th grade. And Tony graduated from Kearsarge High School here. And he went on, he was accepted in college. I never should have let him go back. He was at NYU. I never should have let him come back to the city. I should have sent him someplace in northern Maine or something. You know. But because he got back in there, there was cousins and a family and the rest. And next thing he had dropped out. And then the question is, what happens? At that time, I had the office in Katuka, the economic consulting firm, and I had him come to work for us. He worked the office manager. We had him there for 4 or 5 months. Then he applied for a job at Social Security Administration in New York City. He obviously, but he had family there. It was understandable. And he applied for them, and I was able to give him a reference. Social Security did not know that I had raised him. His name was Bush, mine was McCausland. So he got the job at Social Security, and then later on he got a job at the New York court system. I remember he called me, we talked about it back. He says, you know, Dad, he says, and he still calls me Dad to this day. He said, I'll have to take a cut in pay, but in the long run I'll make more money because I can go further there. And we agreed, and he talked. He'll be retiring from the New York State, New York City court system in a year or so, I guess. I don't know, maybe he's 60 years old, and that he's still there. In fact, when I looked at my email this morning, I had an email notification from him, unbeknownst to that. So that was that. Then, of course, I have Frank and Joel. Joel came to live with us. Carol's children by a former marriage don't really use the term stepson. They're just our kids. And Joel came, he was 7 years old at the time, and with us primarily through high school. And Frank stayed over in the Seacoast area. He lived with his grandmother at that time. He was further than 5 years older, well involved in school. But got there. Frank and his daughter Vivian, the new baby that we had, we took them to the airport yesterday. Annie, Frank, and Vivian. Yesterday afternoon, we drove them down to Logan, and they went back. They were visiting. It's been a blessing. There's one thing that I noticed with my son Greg, when he was born, and it's one of the things I realized immediately was that I really didn't know anything about raising kids. I mean, I was 17 when I went in the Army, and I was barracks and drill sergeant when I got out, and I realized those features weren't going to help me with the children. A typical academic, I had a National Science Foundation fellowship at graduate school, and there was no restrictions on it. I ended up spending the summer after Greg was born taking courses in child psychology, child development, all these different things, human, all those different courses to learn. And I have to say, it without a doubt changed the way I acted with the kids. And finally, I just sum up one of the things, and Frank and Annie gave us this thing, I don't know what we call it. It shows pictures. You load it, and it sits, we have it sitting on the counter so we can see the pictures going off. And I was looking at one from Greg and Jess and the two grandsons who were with us last week, and I noticed when I looked at the picture, you notice that Greg, my son, was sitting beside me, and he had his arm around me. And I, kind of a reversal of roles. I still looked at that. I had to look at it twice. It's like, I don't think I'm going to put it. But he is out right around me, pulling me right in. Fatherhood to me has been very good, and I've been blessed with those uncles. They're also in the Army. I went in at 17 years old. Seemed like every staff, a master sergeant or others, like I was their kid, they were going to make sure I did it right. Some of the advice I followed, some I just let slip.
Thank you.
I just feel very blessed.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So let's move along to our next question. And some of you already touched on this a little bit. But maybe you could each say a little bit more about who has been a role model for fatherhood for you in your own life. And maybe we should start where we ended last time and go around this way. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I had my uncles, and they were there, but my grandfathers were key roles as well. My father's father, I was the only grandson, and I have to say, so on both sides of the family, I was the first male born after 11 girls. Needless to say, I got quite a bit of attention. But they were really like rocks, especially given the separation. I mean, Dad and I were close in the end, all the way through. We lived together, but my grandfathers were very much keys to my thing. Talking to me, I can always remember him telling me, you know, you have to figure when someone does something, maybe they just having a bad day. Cut them some slack. And Grandpa Miller, who was a machinist at White Brothers, he came home at night, he sat in his chair, he smoked his pipe. He only got up to go downstairs, to my recollection, to check on how the beer he was making was coming. But one night, I was found missing. I didn't know I was missing. But everybody else thought I was missing. And I'll always remember that. I came out from, I had been fishing in a local pond, and I was walking out, and it was dark, it was summer, it was probably 9 o'clock or later. And they were out scouring the neighborhood, calling everybody for me. But as I walked out of the shadows, there was this big, hulking figure coming towards me. It was Grandpa Miller. He knew where I was. And he got out of his chair, walked up, and I could him look and say, "You get yourself down the road, lad. No, I'm looking for you." We had the Scottish road, and I got myself down the road. So my grandfathers, but as I say, I feel like in some respects I was very blessed with the uncles, with my father, and my grandfather.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Guy.
So as I mentioned earlier, I grew up without a father figure in the home. But my mother complimented me because she said, "You always found different father figures for yourself." As a young boy, I was 8, I started working at this small Italian bakery, just, sweeping the floors and cleaning up after the mess that was made during the baking and whatnot. And that was Joe Caruba. He was my first, father figure. And then mostly men in the church, Pastor Dickinson, Charlie and Guy Moore, who were brothers and very devout Christians in the church, Jim Bird. And then later I worked for a Greek family, the Gorginas Vouthidelis family. And they're wonderful people who kept me and took me in under their wing and taught me about life and work and responsibility. And then finally, probably the Phil Engelhart, who was a man that I truly loved. He never did anything that he wouldn't do. He never asked me to do something that he wouldn't do himself. I respected him. I would have done anything for that man. And a lot of good men that took me in and taught me well.